Hey friends, it's Cassie and welcome back for another Brutus Monroe video. Today I'm going to be working on ATCs, which are called Artist Trading Cards. So let's talk about what we're going to be using. I'm going to be using this stamp set called Road Trip. We're also going to be using the August Stencil of the month, along with some gesso and media paste. And if you don't know what those are, we will talk about that. We're also going to be using these brand new Aqua Pigments. We've got Cider, Auburn, Hunter, and Acorn. Beautiful, and we are ready for fall. And let me show you what they look like really quickly in my swatch book. Gorgeous, aren't they? Yeah, you're going to want to add those to your collection. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to make 3 because why not? And to get these started, I'm going to use some gesso. So what I have here are the Artist Trading Cards, which measure about 3 by 4 inches. And these are chipboard. These are in the Brutus Monroe store. But to prep these, because I want to do some painting on them, I'm going to use gesso. Gesso is a great product just to prep surfaces. It can also be used to cover things up if you don't really like it. It's almost like a white paint, but it dries matte. And it's just super universal, especially with mixed media. But you could use it in card making as well. So once I've got those all ready to go, I'm going to clean up my mess just using a little water here on my glass media mat. So it cleans up super simple. But gesso is definitely a must, I feel like, especially if you are at all wanting to change up your surfaces a bit. So I want to move on to the next step. So I'm going to heat these with my heat tool. And it'll flatten everything out. So right now you'll notice that those ATCs are kind of curled, but that's just because they got a little bit damp from the gesso. But then I'll just heat those and they'll flatten out. Next, I'll grab that stencil of the month and we're going to grab our media paste. So it's definitely thicker. You can see the peaks in that a little bit better. And this is just to add some texture. It will hold its form pretty well, and it's different because it's something that, I mean, you could use it just as media paste on its own like that. You can add different mediums to it to change the color or look of it, or you can color over the top of it. It just has a lot of uses, and so media paste is definitely another thing that I love to have in my craft room. So I'm just using a palette knife to scrape this across, and you can see that it leaves behind a nice raised image. And then I will clean up my mess a little bit, wipe off the edges, and then we'll set those off to the side to dry a bit while we do our stamping. I'm going to grab out 3 of the tiny little RVs that are in this Road Trip stamp set, and I have some watercolor paper. And I'm going to ink these up with some Raven Detail ink. That ink is great for alcohol marker coloring, and it's also great for watercoloring, so it's just a great universal ink. So we'll just ink those babies up, and then we'll stamp it down. But because I'm doing this on a textured side of my watercolor paper, I'm going to stamp it a couple times just to make sure that I get a good stamped impression. And I just think they're adorable, and they're the perfect size for these little ATCs. Now you might be thinking, what can I do with ATCs? Well, we'll talk about that. But before we do, let's talk about these colors. That first color that I put down is Cider. It's a beautiful, almost like a mustardy color. The next one is Auburn. Then we have Hunter. And then eventually I will bring in the Acorn. But we're going to start with our Auburn color, and we're just going to put some of that down. And we're obviously doing some watercoloring. I have a water brush, and I like to work in layers when I do watercoloring. So I'm just going to put down my first color, making sure to be very careful not to go over those lines simply because I did not emboss these. So where wet surfaces are, if I get into the other wet surfaces, it's going to mix and spread. So I'm just trying to be cautious and careful about where I put my color and where that brush touches. So what can you do with ATCs? A lot of people have asked me that. Artist trading cards are great for, let's say you're going to be around a bunch of other crafters. You can make up a bunch of ATCs, have those all ready to go, and then it's something that you can very easily give out at, say, conventions or craft parties or whatnot, simply to, let somebody else have a little piece of your artwork. And, you sign the back and they have them. They fit perfectly in, I don't know if you all remember the baseball cards from back in the day. Yes, I did collect. I had an older brother, so we collected baseball cards. Love baseball. Now I'm sidetracked, but yes, these will fit nicely into pouches like that of what you used to be able to put your baseball cards in. Or another thing you can do with ATCs is, let's say you have them and you just like to work on small surfaces, you can always attach them to the front of an A2 size card. They will fit perfectly on there and be framed and cute, and so that is definitely something to think about. That it's fun to challenge yourself to work on a smaller surface and see what you can come up with, and then, you know, if you're just definitely a card maker, put one on a card. There are options, or attach some ribbon to it. Make it like a tag even. There's just so many possibilities. All right, I wanted to show that I did put a little bit of the Raven ink on my glass mat. Now, it is not a watercolor ink itself, but for these small tires, I can make it work. I wouldn't want to, you know, do a large surface, but it definitely works in a pinch in this situation. So that's what I had handy, and that's what I grabbed. And as you'll notice, I did put down second layers. So as things dry, I will go back and work on them. And while I'm waiting for them to dry, I will go and work on other areas. So you'll notice there are some fairly harsh lines with my second layers, and I actually like the way that looks, so we are keeping it. And then I'm just going to fill in all the details using this very fine detailed water brush that I have. And I don't know that you'd see any campers that look like this on the market, but yeah, we've been doing, as if you follow me at all, you know that my family likes to do some camping, and so we definitely have a good time with that. All right, now I want to do some watercoloring on these panels now that they are dry. So I'm going to pull out some more of that cider, and I am going to start painting right over the top of where I put that media paste. And you'll notice, which is one of the really cool things about the media paste, is that by watercoloring right over the top of it, you get the watercolor to pool into those grooves, and it adds a lot of texture, and then it really makes that stencil pop. And then we're going to come in with the Hunter on the next one, just slapping down the color. And I like that it isn't perfect. I like that there is some variation in the color. And then we're going to go on and grab, for our next one, the auburn color. So we'll have used almost all the colors just on these panels. And if I'd been thinking, I would have used a wider brush, but this is just what I had on hand at the time. When I move on to using the acorn color, I'll finally figure it out. So I'll heat set that just to make sure that I don't have color running into other areas, and just to see if I need to add extra color in other places. But that's how it dried, and I love how it is, you know, the variation of color, and how some of that color is darker in between where the media paste is held up. So here's where I finally wised up and grabbed a flat brush, and this is where I'm going to add the acorn. I'm trying to make it look kind of like a ground, but you know, this is very abstract, obviously. And I like that that has variation in color as well. So now that that's dry, I'm going to bring in some Grrr ink and my little mini Ergo brush, and I'm just going to ink that around the edges of all four of those ATCs, or all three of those ATCs. And it just kind of grunges up the edges, which is kind of fun. And then here I'm bringing in an embossing pen, because I want to add some of that twisted tangerine. I don't know if you've seen this embossing powder, but it's a fantastic fall embossing powder. And look at that. It's got some sparkle, it's got some orange, it's got yellow. It is just beautiful, and it works really well on that ground, and it adds even more texture to these little ATCs. So we'll heat set that till those are smooth and melted, and we'll do it on all three of them. And then when we are happy with how those are all set up, we're going to do our stamping. So I'm going to use the word Wanderlust from the Road Trip stamp set, which is what we seem to have now that we've gotten that trailer. We want to go all the places. So I'll stamp that down using some embossing ink, and then heat set that after I've covered it with some Alabaster embossing powder. And then this stuff, this stuff came out in a kit, and I believe they do sell it in the store, so I'll have it linked down below. But this is called Cottontail, or Cotton Puff, and I love it because it's great for clouds. And on these, I was able to just stick some down, and then what you do is you heat set it, and it puffs up. It's so cool. Oh, I love this stuff. I hope I never run out because, yes, I want all the clouds to look like this. It's another great way to add some texture to your backgrounds. And so I'll do that with all three of them as well. And then I'm going to use a little bit of score tape because I want something nice and strong on the back of my sentiments because I have a lot of texture going on there. So I'll stick down the word, trim off the excess, and then we're going to cover our little RVs with some foam tape on the back. We're just going to use the Brutus Monroe black foam tape. Just a few pieces of that just to make sure that it's good and covered. And then I'm going to use the pick, what do you call that thing? Now, paper piercer. And I'm going to peel off the release paper, and then we'll pop this down on top of there. And I'll do that for all three, and that will end up finishing off our ATCs. I think these are so much fun. And it's funny, this is not at all what I imagined in my head, but once I got going, I just was grooving to some jams and making some ATCs. So I would love to know what you think. If this is something you'd want to try, leave that down in the comment section down below, and I'd love to know what you think of these. So if you liked this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you have not already done so. And as always, we will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.